Welcome to Denby Does Darhma. I have a very special guest today, Max Lowen, who is a psychotherapist, a truth teller, a survivor of satanic child sex trafficking. And we just wanted to start this conversation with a little bit of just a gentle disclaimer, because there will be a lot of truths revealed in this conversation. So if anyone's watching and you've got young children in the room, it might be an idea to take yourself to another space or maybe turn the volume down. And anybody who has also perhaps suffered from any abuse themselves in any shape or form, just to be understanding that when you're listening to Max's story, that it may bring up some memories for yourself. So this is not our intention to obviously re-traumatize anybody, but it's very important information that we share. And we will explain how this all ties into what we've been witnessing, particularly in the last couple of years, around the whole pandemic situation and how it ties into government and religion and pretty much every aspect of our lives. Here in Australia at the moment, there's something like 20,000 children that go missing in Australia, and that number is around about 8 million worldwide. So this is, in my belief, and I think, Max, you also share the same belief, that this is at the core of what has been going on for centuries. This is not something that has just, been in the undercurrent of society and the psyche just in the last couple of years or even decades. This has been going on since time immemorial, through civilization after civilization. And a lot of us spoke up about this at the beginning of the pandemic and tried to make people aware of the different things that were the other agendas attached to it. And we were shot down for saying it was conspiracy theory and a load of rubbish. So hopefully those people will be watching this conversation. They can actually get a bit more compassionate and understanding about the truth of these situations and just how devastating it actually is for people, and how you can also obviously overcome it. There is still support and light at the end of the tunnel for that as well. So welcome, Max. It's just a pleasure to connect with you. Thank you so much for making time for me today.
Of course, it's my pleasure to be here, Denby.
Yeah. So let's start with your story. I came across you on YouTube. It might have been, I think, with an interview with Penny Kelly. I think you might have been interviewing her as well, talking about consciousness and all sorts of amazing, expansive things. And there was somebody else that I think I might have picked up on you as well. And the minute I saw your story, it was just like heart-wrenching for me. And I've got tissues in my pocket here. I suggest other people get some as well, perhaps. And I was just really touched by your strength, like the strength of your spirit from what you have gone through. And I've watched a lot of videos and I've spoken to other survivors as well, but nothing compares to your story. And it's not about comparing whose story is worse, of course, than somebody else's. They're all horrific. But the things that really struck home with me, I was investigating at the time that I came across you, as far as the structure of religion and all this that's tied into the Vatican, etc. So it was divine timing that you crossed my path. So can you start with a brief synopsis of, and more will come out as we continue talking, of course, of what did actually happen to you and for how long?
Yeah, okay. So the first 18 years of my life is the short answer. My mother's side of the family, her much older brother, my uncle, was part of the what we can call it, the cabal, the Illuminati, the order, whatever name, there's many names, but belonged to sort of that club. And so I was targeted basically shortly after birth. And I grew up in a diplomatic family. So I grew up in 5 different countries in my childhood, a few years in each one. And but every summer and every winter holiday, my mother's Italian, we would be taken to Rome. And so when I was there, my uncle would have access to me. He also visited many of the countries where I lived. And so basically from birth to age 18, I was put through a variety of rituals, tortures, deliberate breaking of attachment with my mother, and studied, experimented on. He ran a facility which was underground in Rome, a little bit in the outskirts. And these kinds of facilities exist in every country. they're kind of a combination of a medical military torture type facility. This particular one was huge. It spanned many blocks. It had all kinds of rooms. Many of the rooms had glass walls so that they could watch the tortures being conducted. The floors had drain holes, and they had these hoses on the wall so they could wash away the blood and guts for whatever they did. They had a morgue in there. They had those giant freezer lockers where they would hang either dead humans or dead animals. I was often hung in there with them alive. And this facility had an underground tunnel and a train that connected to the sub-levels of the Vatican. So that's just to set the stage. And then when I was 14, after we lived in Argentina, my parents divorced. And from that age on, we moved to Rome full time. So unfortunately, my uncle had access all the time at that point. And so I was put through torture in the facility, through satanic rituals, and I was trafficked out of the Vatican and to elites, parties, things like that.
It's just mind-boggling. I'm sure there are people listening just going, oh, well, where's the proof, and how can you know, we all hear about these DUMBs and these underground tunnels, and yet we're yet to see proof of this, and people will be like, well, why didn't your mum stop things? And like, how do you address, I'm sure you've had those questions before, so just to put people's minds at ease, can you share about that?
Sure. So, you know, my mother was also tortured, and also by the time I was born, I'm not sure, I don't really know what was done to her, but it's clear to me now that she had already been abused by the time she had me. So I will describe one of the first rituals that my uncle did. He came to visit. I was born in the United States in California, and he came to visit. I was an infant, and he did a sort of a torture where my mother was in a chair in front of me. I remember being in my crib, and she was tied up, and there was like, the room was dark, and then he would flash lights and make these very loud sounds, and she would be like, the light would shine on her face and off, and then it would shine again, and she'd have a mask on and then off. And then I was swung around the room by my arms. So that is, later I found out that that's a form of MK Ultra. It's a ritual designed to break attachment with my mother, and it did, you know, and there were many more of those. And so she was not well. I saved her from suicide a dozen times maybe in my childhood. The first time I was about 1. So she could be okay, but then she had this thing that, to my experience, it was that her eyes would change, and then she could become actually quite violent herself, or, you know, or suicidal, or just, you know, kind of seemingly go crazy. So she was deeply affected as well. And I have to say, I'm a mother, right? So I can't imagine, she was put through a lot of rituals with me, and so she didn't really have any choice, and it traumatized her. And when I was 2 years old, we had moved to Chile, and my uncle had done this ritual in a Catholic church, and it involved my mother and my relatives sitting in the pews. And there was a small coffin put on the altar, and the priest was there and my uncle. And they laid me in the coffin, and they heated up a metal cross and then put it on my chest. So I remember feeling the burning sensation and smelling, you know, burning flesh, and a chanting and a thing was done. And then they put the lid on the coffin, and they left me there overnight. So that was the sort of foundational ritual. Things like this were repeated later, and it was always to I was like the devil. I was different, separate than the family. So it was really to instill in me that they were sitting there watching and didn't do anything. So it was this repetitive thing that my mother never did anything to stop any of the abuse. However, now as an adult, I can see that she really was not able to. In fact, she was tortured herself along with me.
It's just horrific. Is she still with us, and is she okay now, if she is?
She's still alive. She's in her 80s. No, she's not okay. She's, I mean, loosely you could say mentally ill.
Yeah, yeah, and not surprising. No siblings, Max? Was it just you? And was there?
I have two siblings who are younger, and my youngest sibling was sometimes put in the tortures with me. So that's my sister. But mainly the focus was on me, but they might be used if it was. So there was a test that there would be things that would be done, and my sister would be part of the experiment or the test.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure that the people listening that are very familiar with this sort of stuff, and they've done some research, or that, again, they might have suffered similar things or know somebody that has. But the question that I get asked quite a lot, Max, is like, and somebody said to me the other day, not about this particular issue, but about, why would the government spray us with chemtrails to try and harm us? It's an innocent enough question. But I mean, why do you believe that you were targeted like this, and why do they actually do such horrific things to other human beings? I mean, it's a psychopathic mindset, obviously, so we can't really grasp it. But being the psychotherapist that you are now and having a deep understanding of how the human brain works, whether these people are human or not, who knows? But can you sort of explain or unpack a little bit of that for people that this might be new to?
Sure. Well, it's my understanding that, so as a psychotherapist, I'm trained in trauma, right? And so the cabal, the order, the ones who run this planet, as you just said, are psychopaths. They're also pedophiles, and they're also Satanists. So this sounds like a movie, I'm aware, but they truly do worship Satan and the dark and demons and all of this. So they have tried to create a reality here that is sort of a hellish reality, right? And we have been used for food, not just physically, but also etherically. If you've ever heard the word loosh, right? So if this human population that we are on this planet, this was not meant to be our reality, but these folks had taken control. And so they created a false reality that reflects their satanic belief and religion. And so part of their religion is raping children and drinking their blood and sometimes eating their flesh. So they know psychology very well. So for example, the Tavistock Institute is a creation of theirs, right? And they understand that if they traumatize us, so either individually or just as a collective, if they throw a lot of repetitive, constant trauma, then we become very fragmented, right? That's the response of our psyche to survive, is to split into, so different parts hold different pieces of the trauma so we can keep going, right? And they're very aware of this. So once we're fragmented, we're much easier to mind control and program, right? And when I say mind control and program, I'm not talking about some, creepy guy in a lab, typing things up. I'm talking about things like the educational system. So if you think about it, you start very young, and in the most recent decades, they've falsely told parents the younger the better, right? That children go to school. Well, it's actually the contrary. So indoctrination happens right from the get-go. And even if you think of school itself, you're trained to obey. You're trained to passively receive teaching, and then you have to regurgitate that and give it back to be applauded a good grade, right? And you have to raise your hand even to go use the restroom. So they're training children already to obey authority and not to think not to be creative, but to actually absorb what they're told, and they're rewarded if they can. The more they learn what they're told and repeat it, the better their grade, right? And so even, you know, I have a child, I mean, she's 19 now, but when she was little, I would observe that she would be fascinated by something, anything, I don't know, a flower outside, and spend a lot of time looking at it and drawing it. And so children learn naturally because they're curious, and they need their time and space and their imagination to kind of absorb the things that they're interested in. So even the way school is structured, right? There's one class, and then it's abruptly you have to go to a different topic, and then abruptly you go to the next one. And so it really sort of nullifies that natural, curious imagination learning that children have. So that's just one form of mind control, the educational system. Not to mention the content of what they teach. A lot of it's a lie, right? History is a lie. You know, science, the things they say are lies. And then add to that the media, right? So, and now in recent decades, we have social media. So movies and TV and social media, again, they're pumping out a reality over and over and over again, right? And they know full well that repetition, if you repeat something often enough, people absorb it as truth. So they've traumatized us individually and collectively. So when I say collectively, I mean wars, right? These folks that run the planet have started and funded both sides of every war. And war causes a lot of trauma, also a lot of orphans, so more children to traffic. So this has been, the reality is deliberately created to be traumatizing, and then add in things like, we don't think about this, right? But add in things like poverty. There's no need for any poverty on this planet or scarcity. There's so much abundance that's deliberately created, right?
Yes,
so
yeah.
By the time you add up all the, and I'm not even naming them all, right? But by the time you add all these things together, you've fragmented people, and now you're programming them to live in a certain reality, to think a certain way, to basically to accept being slaves. And then the stress and the negative emotions, the entities that are non-corporeal feed off that energy. So anything that's a lower frequency emotion like fear, anger, pain, that's food to them, right? So that was a bit of a long answer, I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, it's great. I could listen to you all day about this because you're articulating it really well. And we've got to join the dots for people, because everything, the politicians, the whole political system, the financial system, all of these systems are all, they all go up to the top of the pyramid. And that's where a lot of people have difficulty sort of really grasping that, well, how can a very small group of select, I call them deletes, oligarchs, control the entire planet? It just doesn't make any rational sense to people's brains. But then when you break it down into these parts, and we need to unpack these certain systems, then it starts to sort of like, oh, okay, we become more aware of it. And this is one of the good things, I suppose, that's come out of this whole pandemic, is that we're able to have conversations like this now because more people are actually questioning and things are being exposed. For example, we've got a situation here in Australia now in Northern Territory with a lovely little girl who's, I don't know the full story, so I won't make complete comment on that. But from what I understand, that her mother's been trying to protect her, and the police have been hunting her down. They've just found her, and they've put her back actually in the home in the situation of her abuser, because she has a lot of information that can send a lot of very prominent people to jail. And with 20,000 kids in Australia alone, probably more than that, go missing, then where there's been no resources really, or public, not all of those children get time on the television like this young girl has. So there's something special about this young girl, and she's got a lot of information that can do damage to certain people. So we have to question those sorts of things. Obviously, the media is a massive manipulator, and that is controlled by those people.
It was designed to do this.
Totally.
It was designed from the get-go to maintain a false reality for us.
Yeah.
And the system from the top down is designed to support pedophilia, to harvest children. So these agencies in the United States, it's called Child Protective Services, they traffic children. The UN, how many times has it come out that these folks are raping children in the countries they're stationed? How many times has it come out that coaches in sports or medical profession? This is built into the society. This is not some seedy motel street person. The pedophilia, the majority of it is from the very top down. So it's part of the structure of this planet. And child trafficking, just right along with war, are the two most profitable industries on this planet.
Yeah, it's horrendous. And I mean, to get into, not that we want to get into their brain, but we kind of have to, like, to try and understand the psychopathy of this. Like, why do they believe that doing this to children is a good thing for them? Because it's a good thing for them. Obviously, it's totally horrendous to us, but they see that as something that's necessary. They obviously are missing certain genes in the human genome of empathy, etc. But what is all this achieving for them when they use children in this way?
Well, these people have given up their souls, and they have traded their human organic soul for power, wealth, fame, money, all of that. And so when I say that they've given up their soul, they've allowed a demonic entity or a dark entity to take over their bodies. Now, this is what I literally observed myself in the Vatican. So I was taken to, there's these sub levels that people wouldn't know exist. And they have these giant altars. And by the way, altars are for sacrifice. So we've not been told that. You go to church, there's always an altar. That's what an altar is. It's for sacrifice. So I would be there, and it was this ornate room with the big altar, and they would bring in a baby or a toddler or a young child and lay the child on the altar. And the altar would be surrounded by people. It would be clergy of the Vatican and elites of whoever type, and just a variety of people from that class of society. And they would take a special knife, and this is going to be a little brutal, so I'm just warning people. And they will cut the child from here down with the knife while they were alive. And then the blood would just go down, and the altars had these bridges around, almost like a pool table with these four corners, and they would have these very ornate chalices that would catch the blood. And so they would do chanting and candles and all that, sacrifice the child. If the child was very young, they might pop out the heart or some of the organs and literally eat them right there. And then they would drink the blood and share the chalices. And this ritual was designed to bring in demonic negative entities into that room and into people. And Denby, I saw, it wasn't a body like a solid form, but I saw these kind of smoky looking forms that would literally be conjured and come into the room. And the only thing I can describe to you is I have never felt so cold as when those entities were there. It was a bone-chilling coldness, and I would just be vibrating and shaking from the evil. I mean, there's no word for what they are, but that's what it is. They literally bring in more negative energy, more darkness, more demonic entities into themselves and into the planet with these rituals.
Gosh, I can only just imagine the levels of disassociation that go with that. I'm not a psychotherapist, but I understand how I have a basic understanding of how trauma works with the energy work that I do, and it's unfathomable. And the irony too is that this is in the Vatican. I mean, what you just described there is like an ancient pagan ritual when they used to do sacrifices with the funnels and collecting the blood and all sorts of other crazy stuff that would have done. And yet here we are, we've got Christianity and Catholicism in particular, two birds, one bird, two wings, really, that are founded in paganism and these rituals as well, and yet profess to be the complete opposite to, we're fighting Satan and we're fighting the devil, whereas here they are.
Well, think about communion, Denby.
Oh,
You
yeah.
drink the blood of Christ. You eat the body of Christ. I had seen that done. So when I would go to communion, I would think, what? Oh my God. They're telling you, it's always in plain sight. It's just that it's disguised. So, and we're mind controlled so we don't see it. But essentially what they're doing is they're engaging people in a satanic ritual. Now, people don't know. It's not people's fault. They're trying to worship their creator. But what these people do is they insert their Satan or their Lucifer or their darkness in between us and our true creator. And in my opinion, and I'm not knocking religion because it's a comfort to many people, but I do have to say that I believe religion is used to actually separate us from our connection to source God, you know, because we have a direct connection, but we're being told, so here we are and here's source God, and they insert themselves here and say, no, we're the middleman. The priest is the only one that can tell you what to do or whatever. But even if you look at the outfits that they wear in the Vatican, the pointy hat, if you do some research, you'll find out, you know, these symbols are everywhere and the symbols are telling you the truth. It's just that we're not aware. I mean, I would venture to say, think of even about the symbol of the cross, right? Why is God, or Jesus in this case, why is the image portrayed in church of him crucified on a cross, dead? His corpse. Okay, everyone lives and dies. Why not portray an image of this person alive, radiant, right? Why are we watching him on a cross crucified? They took this person and they bound him. And so what is the sign of the cross? You bind your pineal gland, you bind your heart, and then you go across, right? So it's all there in plain sight. And if anyone's ever gone into the auditorium in the Vatican, the entire top wall, it's a serpent. It's a serpent's mouth. So it is there, the symbology. It's just, again, it's been disguised and we've been lied to, and we don't see sometimes what's right in front of us.
Of course, and that's what trauma does, because it's like you just put a veil between yourself and the reality. You're like, no, I don't want to see that. I mean, you could just, that could be an interpretation of what cognitive dissonance is. It's just like, no, don't want to know, don't want to hear and see. And when we spoke before the other day, I've been down many rabbit holes in the last couple of years, certainly, but I've always had an awareness of this stuff anyway. But yeah, when you actually research the Bible and you look at the sacred scriptures and you understand, you interpret the language in the context of which it was written at that time, and certain scriptures take on a whole new meaning altogether. And Yahweh is not exactly who we've been taught is. Jesus is, I believe, that entity, but the God of the Old Testament. And I've just finished reading the Bible, and I'll probably read it again because it's full on. But the Old Testament is full of satanic ritual and incest and circumcision and all these things that would definitely be interpreted and read as being quite demonic. And it's all wrath and blood and sacrifice again. I mean, not human sacrifice, but I mean, you will punishment and fear mongering and those sorts of things.
Yes, this wrathful God, right, who will smite you and who needs your firstborn child. Does that sound like the God of love, the true creator? That sounds like them, right? Yeah. So in my understanding, the Lord in the Bible is not, Jesus is not our true God. It's one of them, Anu. Yeah. So and think of the word Bible and Babel, Babylon. So yes. And again, I really want to be clear. I have a very strong and direct connection to source God. I believe and I know that that is the true creator. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that some of these symbols and the way religion has been used isn't exactly that. That's all I'm saying.
It's not what we've been taught. And then you have to have a curiosity to go and investigate these things, because when you do go through and you read the books and you read the books by the scholars who have studied this for years, which is what I've been doing as well, and actually educating yourself about, you can start to piece things together. And yes, a lot of amazing things in the Bible, of course, and a lot of truth in there, but they've woven it very cleverly as well. It's laden with a whole lot of stuff that is actually very dark and can be misconstrued very easily, because because of the languaging there too. So it's, I mean, I'm sure there'll be Christian, as you know, I've done a New Age to Jesus series in my podcast recently, and have learned a lot from born again Christians and from atheists and from New Agers, and again reading the Bible and reading these scriptures to educate myself. But because I want to know what the actual truth is, and it's really interesting to see that there will still be people that will refute, I'm sure, your story and other survivors' stories, because they don't want to look at the truth. For instance, when you mentioned those hats that the popes wear, that's all connected to the god Dagon, which is a fish god, which is connected to Anu and Enlil and Enki and those sorts of entities at the very conception of when humanity was birthed and hybridized and enslaved, essentially. So, I mean, you can go all the way down there, which we won't have time to do today, of course. But I mean, let's talk about how this also feeds in. We talked about government, religion, we touched on that, and church and war. How do you see this elitist or oligarch globalist agenda also feeding into, the jabs and the arms, and transgenderism, the general New World Order? Because to me, the transgenderism is about destroying the God gene, and that's satanic in itself, isn't it?
Yes. Well, one of their gods is Baal. Right? And Baal is transgender, has breasts, but is male. And so, in my opinion, the transgender agenda, besides being a Baal worship, it's a desire to normalize pedophilia. And in my lifetime, I'm 58. I have seen over the decades the sexualization of children more and younger and younger and younger ages. And they do things slowly. It's the concept of putting a frog in cold water and turning on the flame so it doesn't realize by the time it's boiled, it's too late. So they do things, these people plan things well in advance, and they do them step by step by step. So if you can make it normal that children have the choice to change their gender when they're 10 years old, well, then children can choose to have sex when they're 10 years old, right? So it's a slow, deliberate normalization. It's confusing people, and then that, again, it's traumatizing the mind. There's too many contradictory things. The brain just shuts down, and it just goes with the program, right? And so now, today, they've gotten to the point where they are saying that pedophilia is a kind of sexual orientation, and they're calling themselves minor attracted persons. Now, I know that gay, lesbian, and transgender people do exist, would be horrified that this has been co-opted and put in that format, right? But that is what they've done. And so this is, I think this transgender movement, and along with the transgender movement in the schools here in the United States, it's happening. They're adding a satanic agenda to that too. So in many schools here, they now have Satan Club for kids, right? And so wow, they are trying to steer us into their mindset, into their religion, into the way that they live. And so, yes, what happened in the last few years with the fake pandemic, it was just another, they've done these historically. Every time they traumatize us, they get a little further. So for example, in the United States, 9/11, right? Those buildings, there were no airplanes, those were holograms, and that they were exploded from within the buildings. And that was, I have to tell you, that's a satanic ritual right there, okay? Fire, death, and the date, they have very special dates. They follow, like you said earlier, the pagan calendar. And so certain dates are sacrifice. So 9/11 is a sacrifice date, right? So that was done so that they never have one reason. One reason was they wanted to pass the Patriot Act in the United States, which makes us have no rights. You can spy on us, you can do whatever you want. But it was also to create this, they create the boogeyman, and then they create the savior, right? So the savior is what they want to hurt us to. So they do something, they know the reaction, and we'll go and then they'll say, oh, we'll save you, we'll help you, right? So now this created, the boogeyman was terrorism. So we will save you by clamping down on and spying on everyone because, that's necessary. So just like the Nazis used to say, it's for your safety, right?
Mm.
So that traumatized people greatly. And so that collective trauma, just like a child who grows up in an abusive household, it's over and over again. So by the time you got to the fake pandemic, people were pretty fractured and traumatized. And then what did they do? It's just a new boogeyman. We're all going to die. We're all going to, oh no, you know, and so the savior, the solution was the vaccine, which is designed to further genetically modify us and control us more. That's what they wanted to do. So they wanted to get here. So the fake pandemic was how to herd people into accepting and taking this, right? So that's just how they do things. And that's where you said cognitive dissonance and you know, that the mind gets so stressed that it's easier to just go with the narrative. Because when the pandemic started, I know better because I grew up with these people, right? So I went and looked at the facts out there. There's a pandemic that's killing everyone, but the death rate is 0.002%. In other words, the survival rate's almost 100%. How's that a pandemic? And then wear a mask. But every research study I ever looked at, not one said masks do anything for viral transmission. So why, you know, and then but then if you look at the media, they're pumping out the same thing over and over. If you looked at all the news stations across the globe, they literally say the same sentence, right?
Yeah.
So people just get scared and they run out and they do what they're told, because we've been raised not to be free or not to be sovereign, not to trust ourselves or our connection with source. We've been raised to accept slavery. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but if you obey authority, you consent to slavery, right? So people will obey, well, the TV said it, so it must be true. Well, the government said it, well, the doctor said it, so it's true. You know, there's no discernment of one's own. There's no verification. It's because it's easier. And when you're stressed already, when you're on the brink of anxiety and you're being told there's another terrible boogeyman and there was just one a few years ago, that's why people do it.
You're gonna bend the knee. I mean, we had all that stuff too, like people bowing to an external authority. And you've hit the nail on the head there, Max. And I say this all the time. It's like there's really two types of people in the world: the ones that recognize and follow external authority, and the other ones that don't. They recognize the inner authority, and they're going to hold on to their sovereignty, reclaim that which has been taken from us. You know, as you say, we have been enslaved for eons. And when you believe that somebody or something outside of yourself has the answers, and you've lost connection to that intuitive self, then of course you're going to. It's a very slippery slope. And then once you're on it, it's very, very hard to come off that. And as you said there too, I mean, and it's a very controversial subject too. And you know, I'm not afraid of doing that because I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years. But I was pointing out back at the beginning of all this that the LGBTQT community, with a lot of amazing, wonderful people in there, of course, were being hijacked without even realizing it, and that whole pedophilia dialogue was being slipping in there to normalize what is actually child abuse. And obviously the masks of child abuse. I saw a woman down here the other day where I live walking into a chemist. She had a mask on, and her two looked like 3 or 4-year-olds had masks on. And I had to stop myself from saying something at this point, because you know, these people, you can't wake them up. If they are a believer in external authority, they're going to do what they're going to do regardless, even if that means walking themselves to their own death.
Well, think how stressful it is it's much easier to believe that than to think, right? And to go, oh no, what if this, it's very terrifying and stressful for people to think that my government is actually trying to harm me. My religion is trying to harm me. It's inconceivable for people. And, you know, yet I'm a believer, if you don't know the truth of what's going on, you cannot change it. You cannot find a solution, right? So we have to know the truth. And the other thing, Denby, is people cannot imagine the evil that literally exists out there, right? So I want to give you an illustration, because a little while ago you said, you know, they're psychopaths, they seem to enjoy this, right? They definitely and absolutely enjoy inflicting torture and pain and harm. And so there's so many things I could tell you, but, you know, I'll just stick to a few. So one of the things that I witnessed is I was taken to these elite parties, right? Sometimes it would be in a very wealthy place and it would be a black tie sort of thing. I don't know if you ever saw Eyes Wide Shut, but a ball like that. Yeah. And then there would be, I would be there with other children and we'd all be dressed up. And then these people will pick, they have preferences of gender, age, race. So they will just take whatever child and then, you know, they go to all the rooms and do whatever, rape the children, do whatever they're doing. Sometimes one of the ones I was taken to was on ground. So it had all these outdoor like woods and trees and a mansion. And they would do hunting parties. So we would be brought there in cages and all different ages of kids, and then either naked or dressed in some kind of little outfit. And then we would be told, run and hide. It's like a hide and seek game. And, you know, the kids, we were all terrified, we knew. So the kids all run and hide, and then they have so much fun looking for the kids. And then they find one, and then that kid gets raped, and they're drinking, they're laughing. And I witnessed at one point, there were 2 babies, and this is a bit horrific, I'm sorry, but it's true. They took the babies, they had this really long sword, and they shish kebabbed, impaled the 2 babies on the sword, and they were swinging it around with the babies dying on the sword, laughing and, you know, drinking and happy. And at the end of the night, there's always the sacrifice of one child in the same way I described under the Vatican, but maybe on a table outdoors with food around it. And so this is fun to them. This is entertainment to them, you know. And
sport for them.
Sport, that's right. And my uncle, you know, was like this. So in his facility, I was put through tortures myself and made to watch torture. And one of the things that they had in there is they had this big room full of these poor innocent animals in various stages of torture. So it was like I don't know how to explain it, like an L sort of or U-shaped thing with all these animal sections and stalls. Like one of them was a baby cow, and they had taken the poor thing's skin off, but it was alive. And on the top, there was a thing and it would drip acid. So the cow would scream every time the acid would hit its skin. It would let out this horrific scream. And then another one was like a tank, like a glass tank, and a platform. And they had a cat, you know, with a thing around its head and strapped in there. And the bottom of the tank had water. So the cat they lowered the thing and the cat would become half submerged in the water, and they would throw in some piranhas. And then the piranhas would basically eat the bottom part of the cat alive. And I mean, I just want you to understand the level of, I don't even have a word for it, of evil, of depravity, of these people love death. They love suffering. They love blood. They love inflicting pain. This floats their boat. This is what is fun to them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's as you say, there are no words for that. This, you know, for the Christians and the Bible people that are watching this is hell. Hell is on earth. Hell is not like a figurative place that you're going to go to or be punished in. This sort of stuff is hell on earth right now. And and you are obviously one of many, unfortunately, people who have gone through this. And just thinking of, I mean, I heard someone say the other day, it's like, oh, I don't want to hear about that stuff. And as awful as it is to hear, this is what breaks through to people's heart. Like I'm just crushed inside even hearing that story again. And but this is what creates a sense of empathy and like, how can we sit by and let this stuff go on? And you think, oh, I don't want to listen to it because it's too upsetting for me. Well, it's too upsetting for you. What about people like yourself who have lived this stuff, who have this in their memory bank? And thankfully, you know, you've gotten yourself to a place through a lot of hard work, I would imagine, where you're going to have to live with this, but it's always going to be a part of you. These children that are going through these things, like we as responsible adults, as conscious adults, cannot turn a blind eye to this. But this is, I mean, all this ties in. We've got all these topics that we're talking about, but I mean, I've heard about those hunting parties and I've read about them and I've researched them and I've spoken to a few other people indirectly who have had contact with that. That all connects into the monarchy. So it's like, hello, the royal families on the planet. Those of you who are idolizing the Queen and that are following, Prince Charles and Harry and whatever the hell the name is, all those people, they are all in on this.
They
That
are
is
absolutely
biggest
in on that. Yes, the royals are in on this. Royals all over the planet. The people that work at the global agencies, the UN, the WHO, the IMF, Hollywood, actresses and actors. Some of them are victims too. I want to, make clear. Anyone in any position of power on this planet, if you're a president or a politician, that's the club that does this. Okay. That's the group of people that does this. So I just want to make that really, really clear.
Yeah. And so we've talked about the why, as obviously as you've explained so articulated so clearly, is that this is sport, this is fun for them, this is a night out on the town for these people, mind-boggling as that is.
Well, they also feed on the life of the children, right? On the energy, where's that survival chakra, that first chakra is down in the genital area, right? So because here's the thing, if you're a regular human being like us, you have a direct connection, your soul's in this vessel, but you have this direct connection to source God. So you have life force energy. But what happens when you're these people and you've sold that, or you've traded that for a dark entity to come in and live in you? Well, they're disconnected from that life force energy. So they need to find it somewhere else. So whether it's etheric loosh, or whether it's drinking the blood, or whether it's any of that, it's a way for them to harvest our energy. So this is kind of a strange example, but you know how we have farm animals and, we feed them and we take care of them, but they're in enclosures. So they can roam around a little, but they can't really, they're not really free. Right. Well, we raise them and take care of them so we can eat them and use them as food. Well, that's what we are to them. We're cattle. We're slaves. They look down on us. That's the other thing I want. Not only do they have fun doing all these things, but they consider us basically vermin. They consider themselves to be elite. We call them elites, right? Because they feel that they are way above us. And we're like farm animals to them. I mean, this is literally the way that they see it. And what you just said a second ago is, and I've heard this too, people say, oh my God, I can't hear that. That's too horrific. And it's not about me. Yeah, I experienced that. So I agree, it's horrific. But why I am speaking out is because what you said in the very beginning, 8 million children a year, 8 million, okay? And who's responsible for stopping this and protecting these children? Do you think they're going to stop? This is what they do. If we don't name what's happening, if people like myself don't tell the truth, then how are we ever going to stop this practice? And so that I can't, every day that I wake up and I know that children are being put through what I was put through, it breaks me a little, So I'm trying to do my part by at least speaking out and naming the truth, because we have to, it's up to us to stop this, and we can, because there's very few of them and there's a lot more of us, and we're connected to source God and they're not. And that's why they have worked so hard in every facet of society to mind control us and make us obedient slaves, because of the power that we actually do have.
Yeah, exactly. That's well said, because that's what it all comes down to, basically, that we are, created by, life, God, source, whatever energy you want to put in there. And we're dealing with the death cult that has, like the octopus symbol in all the James Bond movies, and all the recent movies. I just watched Doctor Strange in the Multiverse is laden with satanic symbology. The Thor movie is as well, the latest James Bond movie, the Jurassic Park movie with DNA manipulation. I mean, it's right there in front of our faces, as you know, Max, as well. And it's and even just recently with Anne Hesh. And that was a ritualistic sacrifice for sure. People need to understand things. You touched on it before about gematria and obviously, deciphering the Bible and looking at the numbers and the symbology that they use. And it's literally like learning a language. Once you know a few basics, you can spot things in the media
once you start
instantly.
seeing, you can't not see it.
Can't
But
unsee
did
it.
you know, Denby, that the whole reason they do movies is so they've taken over this planet and they're running humanity, but there are rules, which mostly they break, but we're supposed to have free will. So we are supposed to consent to what they're doing to us. So how do they get our consent? It's very tricky. They put the truth, I mean, and I could say Jupiter Ascending, the Hunger Games, the Matrix, the Bourne Identity, and basically any movie and TV show that you watch is revealing the truth about these practices. So that's what they do. They're telling us, so they can say, well, we're telling them, right? We're telling them, but then we're told it's just fantasy and a movie, but they're telling the truth in these movies. It's just so it's there again in front of our face, but we don't realize that's what it is. And then another form of consent is called implied consent, right? So if you don't say no, you're agreeing to it, right? So that's how they get us as well.
Exactly.
And no one says no, we obey.
We obey, but you've got to know the truth, as in KNOW, in order to say no, NO, to what's going on. So you need to educate ourselves. I mean, Game of Thrones is another perfect example of like just the ancestral side of things. Is all the anything on Netflix essentially.
And the Vikings, I watched that.
Vikings,
they're showing the rituals that the Vikings do that they show on that show. I've seen those.
Yeah,
that's what they do.
Just, I mean. And obviously there's indigenous practices, which, you know, we have in different cultures around the world doing their ceremonies and connecting to Mother Nature and things. But from what I understand with the teachings and the elders that I've spoken to, there's never been anything like that, you know, with that intention. It's always been about maintaining the balance between good and evil or light and dark and bringing in, sometimes some dark magic to rectify that balance, but never with the intent. And I know this with the Australian Indigenous here, never with the intent to just do evil for evil's sake. You know, it's just mind-bending that people can't grasp this, and again that, I mean, thankfully too we're getting more with conversations like this, and a lot of other people around the world that are exposing this in a lot more deliberate ways than I certainly am as well. But it comes at a price, doesn't it? And people suddenly disappear, people go missing, your children die suddenly, or your animal gets hung in the back garden. Like, there's these warnings, and we have to be aware. The fear mongering is very, very real, and they know that too. So, you know, what knowing that, and from that psychological perspective, is there something that we can do on, you know, with our own psyche to, you know, to counterbalance this, to get over that sense of fear of like, oh, I need to expose it, but something's going to happen to me, other than realizing that we're going to die at some point and we can never be killed. Of course, our spirit can never be killed. Yeah.
Well, fear is, they've genetically put that in us. So fear is not even a really natural state either. It's one of their, you mentioned that this planet right now, it's hell on earth. That's correct, right? So fear is, they know how the brain works. So if you are, we have this, they even call it the reptilian brain, right? Where if you go into fight or flight, what happens is the prefrontal cortex just completely shuts down, because in a real survival situation, if you thought it would be too costly, it would take too many seconds. So you have to just react, right? But the problem is we're not in a real danger situation, and this fight or flight is activated. If you watch TV, it's going to be activated 100 times every day, right? So they're keeping us in an induced, almost like a coma of fear all the time. And then sure, you know, they also have not told us the truth about our existence and about death. So people are afraid of death. And so, because when I watch TV, there's always a scene where someone puts a gun to someone's head and then they do the bad thing because the gun's at their head, right? And for me, I would just be like, well, no, I'm not going to do that bad thing. Do what you got to do, right? Because if you zoom, I call it zoom out. If you zoom out, we are eternal beings. We are souls in a human vessel having an experience here. Now, I have had several what they call near-death experiences, because with all the abuse they put me through, I did die several times. And I would leave my body and see it there, but then I would come back in. And so what I can tell you for a fact, I never stopped existing, not for a millionth of a second. Like, it's just me in here or me out here, right? So I think when you know the truth about who we really are, that fear of death or fear itself wouldn't even exist. So fear is a heavily manipulated and pulsed out emotion all the time. And again, it's to keep us in that state of trauma and fragmentation so that we're easily manipulated.
Yeah, no, well said. And false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And it keeps, from the yoga perspective too, we work with the koshas, which are the different layers of your being. So the physical layer and the mental and the emotional layer, just other layers of your that wrap around the seed soul little core center, the inner child that you are, your eternal spirit, the one that the part of you that can never die because you're part of creation. So we over-identify with our bodies, don't we? Or we over-identify with our beliefs and our thoughts or our emotions. And then that makes us more vulnerable and therefore manipulated, or easily manipulated, because of those attachments that we have. So, I mean, it all feeds in to...
I mean, we're kind of taught we are our body, right?
Totally.
I remember years ago, I think probably everybody watched the show Grey's Anatomy, right? It was very entertaining. It was about surgeons. Now, this is also them, right? They're cutting the flesh. They're doing these physical things to the body. Well, that's not necessary at all, because we have a physical body and we have an energy body and we have all these other etheric bodies. And it's known and it's been practiced here on the planet, and it's been practiced in different ways. You can heal the body without cutting it or giving it a chemical pill or anything like that. So why are we, it's so brutal. It's so devolved. Why are we why is surgery a thing, or pharmaceuticals or pills, when our bodies can be healed with energy, with food is medicine, with there are entheogen plants that you can take, like psilocybin and ayahuasca and things like that. There's many modalities of healing, energy work that can address anything, and the body and the psyche and the soul are all one. So if you address the dis-ease, it's dis-ease. You're out of balance. That's all it is, right? But again, we've been lied to by the scientific and medical establishment, because we've been told that illness is some little bug or some little virus that goes in you and makes you ill, right? But that's not true. We are an environment, and if our environment is out of whack and out of balance, then we'll become ill. It's more like if you have a bunch of garbage in your body, then
it's going to come out.
You're going to get cockroaches eating the garbage. That's what the viruses are. They're actually, so when you have symptoms and you're ill, it's actually your body detoxifying itself and healing itself. And the body heals itself, right? When you go out in the wild, do animals have doctors and pills? No. We are self-healing, but the whole reality of the body has been flipped and twisted. And so we're both told we are the body. We're told there's no such thing as, blah, blah, blah. And so it's very confusing. So people have no idea what the reality is. And then, let me just say, add to that, they poison our water, fluoride, chlorine. They add all kinds of horrible things to our food. They create food that isn't even food, right? Then the vaccines, no matter what the vaccines are, they detoxify your body, right? The pills, the pharmaceuticals were designed by Rockefeller to, I've seen a document where they literally say, we will fill their bodies with these poisons that they will think are medicines, and then they will come to us and we will further give them treatment that makes them even worse. So poison, the chemtrails you mentioned, that's poison in the air. There's poison in the soil is depleted. So all of that is creating, I think today, most people think being sick is almost normal, right? But it's not. It's not normal. Normal is health. So they've had to do deliberately a lot to get us to be this unhealthy. And then they tell us it's these scary little things that come into our body and make us sick. That's not what's making us sick.
Yeah, it's a disconnection to Mother Earth, which they've been working on for centuries, of course, to erode that natural innate knowing and connection. Of course, Mother Nature has a remedy for everything. That's the nature of her, of Sophia, of the goddess, of Gaia, whatever word you want to pop in there.
And the frequencies, I forgot that. The cell towers that are all around us, they're designed with frequencies that make us, our minds very malleable and easy to control, and make us ill too.
Definitely. I mean, there's lots, we've been pumped here in Australia in the last couple of weeks, more so than usual. And people are complaining of headaches and brain fog and feeling like just forgetfulness and just, we're being, the oxygen is being sucked out of our bodies, which again is what they want to do. And that's the whole climate change thing as well. So actually, that's the biggest ones of hoaxes of all time. And I fell for it many, many years ago as well, before I went, hang on a minute, it doesn't make sense. We all probably have, but they want to deoxygenate you. So when they take the oxygen out of the planet and out of your body, then you've got no energy. You're not going to fight back, because you literally can't even lift your hand to do anything. Right. So
and they tell us the problem is carbon dioxide. That's what makes the planet green. Trees and plants eat carbon dioxide. So when they say they want to reduce carbon, once you start seeing, you can see what they're telling you. They're telling us they're trying to reduce us because we're made of carbon.
Yeah.
We're the carbon they're trying to reduce.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, they hate us so much. The word, death cult just comes back to mind. With with the Vatican as well. I don't know if you know, there's a guy on YouTube who's done many research for many decades on this, guy called Jonathan Kleck, and he's done many videos explaining the altars that you mentioned in the Vatican, which are basically all satanic, and there's dead sheep and reptilians woven in through all of this. There's faces of dragons on the architecture. When you go down in the middle of the building, which is down to the sacred area where no one's allowed to go into, there's an inverted cross. it's there right in front of you as well, and you would have seen this and a lot more. The Vatican itself, the building is a snake with that, the face of it, the altar that you go into, and there's another building or a series of buildings that curve around that form a new, more modern version of that building structure, which again is a snake. So it's in our faces, ridiculous, every single moment. Again, that's that cognitive dissonance. I'd rather not know, because it's going to traumatize too many people possibly. But I wanted to ask you, Max, why do you think, with all that we said, near-death experiences and the trauma that you've had, you coming back into your body, and obviously an incredibly powerful, strong soul that you are, why do you think they didn't actually kill you like they did so many other kids? What was different or special about you, or what role did you play, do you think, that made them let you survive to tell the tale?
Well, they did try to kill me. It's just that they couldn't.
Oh, okay.
So I know other survivors of the same kind of abuse as myself. Actually, two of my good friends who are Australian survivors, and they say the same thing. I made a contract to come here, to be here for this time now, because this time now is actually when God's source is coming back, the light is returning, this dark cycle is over. And if you look out into the world, you can see the signs of the collapse of the whole system that they've designed. It's just falling apart right in front of our eyes. Yeah. So I was killed. I did die, but I always came back because I was meant to survive and be here. And I believe, so when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, I was living in Lesotho in Africa. And I was lying outside at night and looking up at the stars. And I saw this vision of like all these shooting stars coming down all over the planet. And what I heard, what I received was, okay, a bunch of you came to be here. When you grow up, you'll begin to find these people, I was told, and we've all come here to facilitate this transition from darkness to light. So, in the New Age, which is a program, by the way, but they do call us light warriors, and that is the truth. So I'm just one of many light warriors here to do my part to change this reality. So when you have a contract to do that with God, you're going to survive. And people have survived things that you're not supposed to survive, right? But here I am. So no, they did try and kill me.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that they didn't. And thank you for explaining that really well, because the first couple of videos that I watched a couple of years ago now, which were horrific, and I don't suggest it's not for everybody to watch. Okay, you don't need to go and watch these things. Some of us are just called to do that for whatever reasons. But I had some past life flashbacks when I was watching these things, and I was like, I haven't experienced that in this lifetime, but I know on some level somewhere I was resonating with the story that you were saying very viscerally in my soul, because I had actually been through that somewhere else, wherever. And that was a very profound moment for me. And I was like, right in that moment, I think I finished watching the video. I went, F you, Satan. I see you. I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to sit by and let this go unnoticed, or and I'm going to speak out about it. It was really interesting. So there's people like myself that can support others by getting the messages out, even though we may not have experienced that ourselves. But again, it comes down to, if there's one person on the planet that has suffered horrendously like that, or a group of people, then that affects all of us, because we are all the one heart. We are all
and you are doing God's work, because you're trying to expose these things, right? And I don't know if you're aware, but the whole reincarnation cycle was also one of their things.
Yes, I am.
When I was little, I used to look up and I used to see a gray veil over the planet. I see things in my inner eye, they're visions, and they tell me things, right? And that's actually almost gone. It's like a few years ago, it was Swiss cheese when I would look, and now it's pretty much not there. And so they trapped our souls in a reincarnation cycle, because when we leave, we're supposed to go right back to God's source. But for millions of years, we leave and then we're recycled right back into another lifetime. So think about that too, when the idea that they deliberately traumatize us. So what happens when and anytime you've been here, you've been traumatized to one degree or other, then you leave, you don't get a chance to go back to source God and cleanse and heal. You come right back, you bring that unresolved trauma back. So now if you've lived 100 lifetimes, you're 100 times over traumatized just when you even come in, right? They've thought of everything.
Yeah. And that's attached to that dialogue too. That's been a process of me moving through that in my own way, definitely, Max, in the last few months, but because I've worked with that program for many years and taught it as well. But when you hear also, New Age people saying, "Oh, well, that child, they chose that experience because they reincarnated back into this life to have that, and therefore it's not their fault," but implying that it's their fault that they're suffering abuse like that. That just never resonated with me. I was just like, hang on a minute, there is evil in the world and bad shit happens. I can't imagine a little baby signing up and saying, "Yeah, I'll go in and experience the things that you've witnessed." What do you say to those people?
So the New Age is a program just like religion. So the New Age, they think ahead. So they created the New Age program to trap. So if you untrap yourself from one thing that you figure out, there's always another trap they have, and another trap. So people who saw through religion in whatever way, now the New Age is another place that they can be, contained. And so the New Age, think about it. It teaches, well, everything's relative. There's really no good and evil. Yes, there is good and evil. And the New Age says, if you just don't look at evil, if you just focus on love and light, then everything will be fine. Well, that's a nice, convenient message, because now you're not going to fight that evil. You're not going to speak the truth, and you're not going to try and do anything about the evil. So how can you say, well, if I just focus on love and light, 8 million children are being raped, babies are being raped, okay? That is true, that is a fact, and that is what we call evil. And so I believe that program exists. It's like to park people in a false light cul-de-sac. So they sit there and they don't do anything in their life, because we're all here as, sparks of God's source, warriors for the light. And we're meant to say no and stop the bad stuff. So there's so many things in society, including the New Age program, that have basically stripped us of that, so that we're compliant and we obey and we don't fight and we don't do anything and we just accept. Yeah,
just let that don't think about that negativity, because you'll make more of it, and you'll the distorted versions of the natural law, which there is natural law, and as you say, there's good and evil, there's right and wrong, there's right relationship with the earth and with other humans and with all sentient beings, all beings, all creations of the one creator. But it's a doozy of a manipulation story. I mean, they've had access to all the psychologists and all the information and all the drugs, and I mean, this is what the word occult means. Obviously, hidden knowledge. They've been manipulating us, evil genius for a very, very long time.
I mean, think of the word culture, cult, sure, right?
Yeah,
we're raised in a cult.
Yeah. How did you get out? You said from the age of basically birth until 18. What were the circumstances that enabled you to get free, Max?
My father is American, so I was always I did high school in Rome in Italy, and I was always going to come to the US for university. But I also want to say one of the reasons is because I said no. So by the time I was about 17, my uncle, they like to do Jesus rituals of all kinds, but I won't go into it. But suffice to say, they had used my sister in that ritual, and I just had enough. I got to a point, and it's like I stepped into my power, and some part of me understood that that I could say no. So I basically became very, very angry. And this is going to sound a little fantastic, and I'm sorry, but the anger that I had was so big that it raised some wind around me. It was like almost like a little tornado-ish thing. And I could see in that moment, I looked my uncle in the face and I said, no. I said, I'm done. You will not do one more thing to me or my siblings or my mother. And I said, because if you do, what's going to happen. And he could see like what was happening around me. And he sort of backed down in that moment. He did come to my high school graduation, and he gave me a leather kind of binder thing. And in there were some photographs, and he had written, you're a killer and you will always be a killer, right? And that is because I was given, I was put in all these situations in the torture facility where people were shot and blown up and, all these things. So he tried to tell me that, you're part of this evil and you'll never get away. But I did. So I got on an airplane and I came to the United States, and, at some point I changed my first and last name, and I just started, and I went and did my healing. I went to therapy. I became a therapist. I worked with trauma, which itself healed me. So I worked in the jails and in the prisons and in the inner city and at rape crisis center and with abused children and things like that. So I studied, I went to school, and then I was able to help people. So all of this gave me back my power too. It was like when I was in the facility and people would be tortured in front of me, there's nothing I could do, right? And so to have agency to help people and to heal myself and help other people heal was part of my recovery, right? But that's how I got away. I basically, there was a plan for me to come study here, and my uncle, my father was kind of out of the picture, so that would have been a question mark. But then I said no. I said no more, I'm done. And see, the thing that they don't want us to know is how deeply powerful each of us are. Because the way I look at it, if God is an ocean, then each of us is a drop, right? So we're part of it. And we're here for God. We're here. And this planet has been taken over by evil. All those movies about the battles between good and evil, people, they're telling you the truth. Okay. So what if in those movies, no one fought on the side of light? Well, that's what we're here to do. And we're very powerful, because think about it. Why do they do so much to traumatize us, to poison us, to, indoctrinate us, to all these things that they have thrown at us from birth onwards? They do so, even the reincarnation cycle, right? Think of the effort that these people have gone to keep us, down. Yeah. That tells you just how powerful we actually are, in my opinion.
And it's really interesting too when you say that, Max, that for all the the flaws that I've discovered and many other people have shared as well that are in the Bible, that the power of the name of Jesus, and that being, is the one that they target so much. They don't spend their time targeting Buddha or Krishna or Gandhi or anybody else. It's always Jesus, Yeshua. So there is power in that name and in that being and that light, whether you believe the actual story that's in the Bible and what they've fed us or not.
Well, why do you think he's on a cross, bound and crucified and dead? It's almost like they're taunting us. They're taking that real person and saying, look what we did to him. That's what you get.
Yeah. Your recovery, I can imagine, is possibly going to be ongoing as well in different stages. There'd be things that would still be coming up, and obviously having conversations like this, bringing the past back up. So I apologize for doing that, but I honor your courage and strength and commitment in doing so. But you mentioned the word when we were speaking before of being an overcomer, and obviously you're not a victim, and even survivor is kind of like an old sort of term as well. So how are you describing yourself and teaching others that have been through similar situations with you to transmute all of this?
Yeah. Well, like we've talked about, a lot of people are unaware. And let's say if you're a child and you've been repeatedly abused or raped or whatnot, you have amnesia, you split off the event and you put it somewhere else, behind you. And so the first step is to remember, to hold the truth of what happened to you. And so there's stages. So you have to be a victim first, right? Because you have to recover all these pieces. In shamanism, they call it soul retrieval. They say that trauma, it's like if you punch a mirror and then it fragments. They say pieces of your soul leave during the trauma. So the healing is to bring those pieces back, right? Well, so the first step is to acknowledge and bring these pieces of what happened to you back into your awareness. And so for a while, you're going to feel the victimization because you were a victim, right? It's just that you don't stay there. So then you graduate to becoming a survivor. You do work on yourself, but surviving is not living or thriving, right? So we want to go beyond that. And I think it's Gabby Chong who calls it an overcomer. And so I like that word because now you've overcome this thing. So you can use any word you want, but the stages of healing are such that I don't think we're ever done growing or developing ourselves. I think until the day we die, we're always going to achieve a higher state of ourselves, right? But in terms of this, it's a process and people have to go through the different stages of the process. But eventually, I would say I'm an overcomer now, but as you alluded, it doesn't mean I still don't struggle with things, I mean, there's just, I've healed a lot and I can live my life, but yeah, there's things that still, it was really, and I've actually overcome this kind of recently, but for years I couldn't, if I traveled, staying in a hotel, I wouldn't sleep the whole night. Or staying in an Airbnb or something because I was trafficked out to these elites' homes or out of hotel rooms. And so that even though my mind knows I'm an adult, I'm safe, I'm choosing to go on vacation, you can't help, that panic would come back, right? So just everything in my life, whenever I would identify, oh, okay, this is a part of my trauma and it's affecting me, then I would work on it and I would change it. Or, when my daughter was small and I stayed at home, I quit working to raise her because, well, I wouldn't trust anyone else to be with her, right? And it's the best decision I ever made. I'm very glad I did that. But my husband would come back from work and, I'd be, full-time mom, and he'd take her to the park to give me a break for an hour or two. The minute they left the house, I would start to panic and I would call him and maybe he wouldn't hear the phone. So then I thought, oh no, they're dead. They kidnapped my daughter. They're raping her. He's lying in a ditch. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. And the whole time they were gone, I would be in a blind panic. And then he would see the phone and call back. And then I would realize, oh gosh, I'm so foolish. But that would be another way that the trauma would impact my ability. I couldn't even relax in the hour or two I had to relax, right? So I've overcome that. So it's a series of, there's always things that I find, and then I just try and, I say, okay, that's another one. And then I do the things that I do to heal that. And I have noticed that I've been successful. So who I am today and the internal freedom I have today and the internal peace I have today is a miracle to me compared to how I was a few decades ago.
Oh gosh, yeah, all power to you for sure, Max. And in the shamanic work that I do, I use the word residual. Like there's always some residual and different layers of things to reclaim and dissolve and reintegrate and re-love back into wholeness. And
but for all of us, right?
All of us, yeah. That's the human experience, and it's intense. What would you say to people who may be watching this, or someone watching this who knows someone else who's in the situation where they are aware of something like this going on with either someone in their family, one of their cousins, maybe their own child, maybe their neighbour's child, maybe one of their friends' kids at school they just know of. What would you say to them that if they're feeling, oh, I don't want to report this, or it can't be as bad possibly as I'm thinking, or whatever? What would you encourage them to do if they're witnessing something like this?
That's a really difficult question, Denby, because if you report them, you're taking the child and putting them in an agency that traffics children.
Of course.
Right? So so I hate to say this, but the system is designed to support pedophilia. So I would not report. I would try and find a way to get that child help, or, you know, in terms of someone, a therapist or something, or even get the child to live with somebody else, like somehow, you know, remove the child from the situation. And hopefully as we go forward and things get, you know, exposed, and we would come up with more and more real solutions for children, because I think it would be important to have a real outfit that does help children, right? But unfortunately, the ones that exist, for the most part, don't. Now, that's not maybe true of everything. So people really need to investigate, you know, before they go and blindly report. They need to kind of make sure, you know, who they're reporting to and whatnot. But that's a very complicated question. And I think there's such a vast problem, as you named it, that, you know, there's going to have to be solutions and who's going to come up with those solutions? We are. Yeah. Right. So I'm working on that myself, you know, so stay tuned, you know, see what I can work out. But yeah, it's a tough one, because the system is falling apart, but we're still in this. Right. So.
Yeah, no, I probably should have been more specific, because I wasn't necessarily meaning to infer that go straight to the authorities, because we obviously know what the majority of that complex is who they report to, of course. But maybe just like we've got citizen journalists, which is kind of what I am possibly as well. We're doing podcasts and things. We don't have any, you know, formal training, and we may have a little bit of that, but we're there speaking the truth, like yourself being a truth speaker, maybe raising awareness within your community, and
absolutely.
Offering support to the family, and, you know, having interventions, gentle interventions and things, and conversations about the stuff that, you know, the uncomfortable stuff that we don't want to face and look at, because you keep lifting up the carpet and putting it underneath, then we're going to miss this golden opportunity in this point of time with human consciousness to break ourselves free. And the babies and the children, the next generation, we have to look after them. I just got goosebumps through my whole body. We have to stop injecting them with poisons, and we have to stop them from being subjected to these absolutely horrendous situations that we just don't even have words for at all. The level of evil that is rampant on this planet now. I mean, to finish up with, Max, you mentioned before that, you know, your spiritual connection to source, to God, throughout your journey. I mean, were they also sort of pushing scriptures and things down your throat as well, or giving you an inverted satanic Bible lessons during that? Or like, what's your relationship with God now? And now, how do you feel when you either go to church or go past a church or come across really, very religious types, you know, the spirit of religiosity, as I call it, because there is a religious spirit in a lot of righteous Christians and other religions as well. How does that, you know, how do you cope with that?
Well, when I came in, even as a small child, one of the reasons that I survived is because I came in with that connection intact. So when I was a child, I was raised Catholic. I think the energy, it doesn't matter what outfit you dress it in. So for me, it was Jesus. I was always talking to Jesus when I was a little child, right? And so that whatever was happening, like, you know, I would be put in, once I was put in a box that it's completely sealed, so there's no light. It kind of makes you crazy for a long, long time, or in cages and left alone, you know, without food or water. And what would happen is I would be with Jesus, and then there would be animals. So I particularly loved dolphins and elephants and lions. And so I would be in a different place with them, right? So I had that comfort. And so I knew, I mean, I remember being quite small and thinking, oh my God, like, what is this place? This is not, it wasn't wherever I came from, it wasn't this hellscape, right? And so I was shocked at the brutality and the darkness, but I understood I was here among other people. I mean, I'm not special, you know, among all of us to help. So that sustained me a lot. And then in my 20s and 30s, you know, when I got out, apart from going to school and working, some people withdraw and shrink, but I wanted to live because I felt that I hadn't gotten a chance to live. So I was just outward and living. And so in those stages, I was more disconnected from God's source because, you know, I'd just been through all that and I just wanted to be normal. And then as I got a little older, that some of the memories that some of it I remembered, some of the more horrific things I had repressed. And so I began to as that stuff came back, as the negative traumatic things came back, so did the connection with source, right? So I reestablished that connection. And so it's just a part of my reality every day. I wake up in the morning and I say, I am guided by source. You know, the I am is a very powerful sentence, whatever follows it. So I say, I am guided by source, and I ask source to speak through me, to think through me. You know, I'm a fallible human being, but the best that I can, right? Well, in terms of Christians, I adore Christians. I very much feel a resonance because Christians know that there's that God source creator. Now, religion is just something else. I will not go into churches. To me, they're traumatizing, right? So I will not go and worship or any of that because, again, you know, it's the direct connection. But I adore people who are Christian or religious because what they have is they already know that that's real. And it doesn't matter if religion is a program. The main thing that matters is that you have that connection. So if you have that connection, and however you have it, the important thing is that you have that connection, right? So I would say I love people who are Christian or religious. I think they've already got something going there.
Yeah, and that's the magic word, isn't it? It's love. It's compassion, unconditional love, realizing that we're all humans in our different expressions, and that we need, you know, the more that we fight again over who's got the right story and who's going to go to hell or heaven or whatever, it's like, well, we've all got to actually come together.
But hell or heaven are not places. They're not locations. Hell or heaven isn't a place that you go to. Hell or heaven is a state of being, right? And we've been put in a hell state of being, but we have the power as drops of that ocean of God to come here and change this state into heaven. So we have the power to take the world as it is now and make it a heaven on earth. So let's do it. Yeah.
Giddy up. Most definitely. Bring it on, sister. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, Max. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So much empathy and so much gratitude for you being the source of light that you actually are. I really hope that this message reaches the people that it needs to, and that it will encourage people to go and maybe do some investigating and to maybe open their hearts and their minds to things that may challenge them a little bit, but with the understanding that, you know, these things need to be cleared for all of our benefit now, and we just can't let this kind of crazy evil horrors continue on this plane and across any dimension anymore. So thank you so much for your time today, and sending you lots and lots of healing.
And thank you too. Thank you for doing your show and for having me on and for being someone that exposes these things. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, darling. Till next time.
Till next time.